Welcome everyone to another edition to As Above, So Below Radio. I'm your host Martin Hodgson, and it gives me great pleasure to have you tuning in today. When you get a chance, please visit the website holisticadvocate.com and sign up for my free newsletter. Also take a moment to subscribe and become a member. You'll not only gain access to our commercial-free subscriber-based interviews, but also treat yourself to an assortment of fascinating people worth listening to. Today's guest is Meria Heller. Meria is an author, a lecturer, a gifted psychic, a Reiki master, and produces weekly radio shows on her website, which is called Meria.net. A proponent to civil liberties as well as an outspoken personality on a variety of subjects, Meria imparts her sincerity, wisdom, and unique perspective to the issues at hand. Join me in welcoming Meria as she discusses the declining American Republic. First of all, Meria, I want to give you a warm welcome for being on As Above, So Below Radio. For any of our listeners who may be new to, as to who you are, can you give a brief background about yourself here?
Well, sure. First of all, I guess the way most people know me these days is from my internet radio show, which actually enters its 14th year this month on the net.
Wow.
And that's at Meria.net, Meria. And I'm also a published author. I'm also a fairly well-known watercolorist. Let's see what else. An environmentalist, a friend of the earth, a friend of all living things. I teach spirituality. I teach the Native American medicine wheel, an updated form of it. And I'm a concerned mother and grandmother about what's happening in the world, especially here in America.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also have a website, correct?
Yeah. It's Meria.net, Meria.net.
Okay, and you've written, 3 books plus a recently introduced book?
Well, actually, I've got 4 books out now.
Okay.
One is on the medicine wheel, one is on Reiki, one is on relationships. That's my new book, which deals with relationships of all kinds, not just romance.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my first book, which was published years ago, called The Awakening of an American, How My Country Broke My Heart.
Okay. So here's the thing, Meria, here. I'm producing this radio show because each day it's my perception that our cherished American Republic is in a decline. From my perspective, it's just dying. Each day, newly written secretive legislation is being introduced that strip us even more of our rights. You have politicians that are attempting to, in effect, rewrite the U.S. Constitution. You have the drug industry working in complicity with the U.S. government to force vaccinations to the public. You have propaganda that is being spewed on the airwaves to confuse the masses. And now, with the recent NSA surveillance scandal, if anyone didn't realize this incident was a wake-up call to all of us, then you have my utmost sympathy. And I can go on and on here citing a whole laundry list of crimes being committed, but I want to focus on key issues here in this interview. So what I'll do, Meria, is mention certain topics, and we'll pick up from there, okay?
Sure.
Okay. First and foremost comes to mind this whole NSA surveillance scandal. There have been rumors in the alternative media and even in some books, such as George Orwell's 1984, dealing with this. But what really landed this issue in the hot seat was how the mainstream media reported this. And what was even insulting was how politicians like Harry Reid goes in front of the cameras and says, "Calm down, we've been doing that stuff for years."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what's your perspective on this whole scandal, Meria? I mean, are we just seeing the tip of the iceberg here?
Well, obviously we're seeing the tip of the iceberg because some of the representatives that were able to really see the whole program behind secret doors said it's way worse than they're telling us. Today I had a news show, and I mentioned that the NSA also has what they call the big eye in the sky. So they're spying on the entire planet via satellite. So 1984 wasn't supposed to be an instruction manual, but it sure looks like 1984 came. It just came 20 years later than predicted.
Okay, now there's news here that the Obama administration is urging federal employees to spy on each other to avoid any further leaks. Do you believe that we've just gone way too far, that it's beyond the point?
Absolutely. This week I actually had two shows that I thought were spectacular. One I did with Professor Jim Fetzer, and one with a social critic named Guy McPherson. And when you put the two shows together, you realize not only have they gone too far, but America, as we know it, is over. It's not something that can be salvaged at this point. It's done. We're supposed to be fighting for freedom and democracy, or as George Bush said, they hate us for our freedoms. Well, obviously they don't hate us for that anymore because we don't have any freedoms.
Right.
So, America is a failed experiment.
Okay. Now, what about Senator Dianne Feinstein? I mean, here's a politician whose husband is an investment banker, and here she goes on camera and says it's called protecting America. And in echoing what was stated by Harry Reid, she commented that what was done was lawful under the Business Records section of the Patriot Act. And here she is bent on a crusade to ensure the passage of an assault weapons ban bill, and among other items include the registration of owners and any transferee, positive identification with photograph and fingerprint, registration of type and serial number of firearms, certification from local police of personal identity, and so on. Okay. Now, the irony in all this is that I posted an entry on my blog, on my website, that the Department of Homeland Security has been acquiring a huge amount of riot gear, which includes obviously guns and ammunition. So here's this bill that is being lauded to the American public to ensure that people don't commit killings by assault weapons, but yet the DHS is stockpiling massive amounts of weapons similar to what the SA and SS did under Hitler and the Nazi Party.
Right. So, the goal isn't gun control. The goal is control. And as one of my esteemed guests said so clearly, when they come for your guns, that's the time to use them. And they're obviously getting ready for a war on America. We just made an agreement with Russia. We just made a pact between Russia and FEMA that Russia will give us 15,000 of their troops in case of civil unrest or any kind of strange happening in America. Now, I've been predicting this on my show because the average American soldier is not going to fire on another American. But bringing in foreign troops, they're not going to have a problem firing on us. But most of America still chooses to stay asleep and think that nothing's going to happen to them. And it's very similar to what went on in Nazi Germany before Hitler decided to, blow everybody away in his concentration camps.
Well, I've heard rumors that there are Chinese soldiers stationed in Mexico in case there is, let's say, something happening here in this country. They're ready to just cross the border.
Well, we train foreign troops here all the time. And living in Arizona, I can tell you that a lot of the illegals that come in through the border here are not Mexicans. They're Chinese. And people still don't pay attention. On the other hand, the other front of war, China's been buying up most of the United States, which is understandable since they have all our money.
Mm-hmm.
So, we may think we're the United States of America, but we're nothing but, an investment pool for the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's also rumor and chatter on the internet that the sole reason to introduce this assault weapons ban bill is to set the stage for further bans on owning guns because the feds anticipate civil unrest as a result of an economic collapse and quite possibly unfriendlies coming to Earth. I mean, it's no secret that the feds, the secret government, so to speak, have knowledge of looking glass technology where the future can be peered into and as a result take steps to enact these changes to leave the public defenseless. What's your perspective on this?
Of course. They know it's coming because they created it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why all the police in this country have been militarized. We have a militarized police force.
Mm-hmm.
This is why you see, troops, National Guard troops, etc., policing the streets. I understand they want to put 15,000 National Guards on the ground in Chicago.
Wow.
Where, by the way, they have the toughest gun laws in the country and the most shootings. So, once they take away the Second Amendment, it's a free-for-all for them.
Okay. All right, I want to talk now about Edward Snowden. There are people who look at him as a traitor, and there are others who are hailing him as a hero. As far as I understand, he's currently in Russia, but we don't know exactly his whereabouts. There's been some countries such as Ecuador that have been rumored to accept him for safety, but we'll never know exactly about his whereabouts. We know his passport has been revoked, which in effect leaves him, according to Julian Assange, marooned, and the feds are now accusing him of espionage and that they can get away with it, treason. Now the big irony here is because, as far as I know, both you and I haven't given the U.S. government our consent to spy on us, but there is the National Defense Authorization Act. But in all honesty, what's the definition of a terrorist? Someone who conspires to blow up a building on U.S. territory, or someone who legally owns a gun, owns gold coins, refuses to get immunized, and grow their own food by having a garden in their backyard.
Right. Well, what could be a greater terrorist than the U.S. foreign policy?
Mm-hmm.
We are the terrorists. Whether people want to admit that or not, it's because they don't know what our foreign policy has always been and why we do the things we do. As far as Ed Snowden, first of all, he's not a traitor. Okay,
Right.
He's not guilty of espionage because he didn't sell secrets to other countries, and that's what you'd have to do to be guilty of espionage. And I think if anybody's committed treason, it's the Bush-Obama White Houses that have killed our Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of making a big deal over what Ed Snowden did, why aren't they making a big deal over what he revealed that our government has been doing? I did have a story today. According to a latest poll, 55% of Americans think Snowden is a hero.
Well,
so, I have to agree with that because to me, he's the greatest patriot since George Washington. Because that kid knew his life was over once he did that. And he did it anyway because he took an oath to uphold the Constitution, to work for the NSA,
right,
from foreign enemies and domestic. So he was just fulfilling his oath.
Yeah.
No different than Bradley Manning. And, as far as him being stateless, that's against international law to make somebody stateless.
Mm-hmm.
So we continue to break international laws like there's no tomorrow. The rest of the world knows it.
Yeah. Do you honestly think that he'll find safe passage to a country, to any country that...
Well, Venezuela has granted him asylum.
Okay.
And because of his releases, all of Latin America is up in arms, having been spied on. So it kind of backfired on Obama because now you have all these Latin American countries
Mm-hmm.
that are willing to take him in. So I think these people are not as smart as they think they are because they don't think their whole plan's through. So yeah, I'm pretty sure, and he could get a passport through the UN.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that'll happen. Truthfully, I mean, maybe we should all take up a collection for him or rent a private jet and get him the hell out of the Moscow airport.
Right. Okay, well, I want to switch now to enemies of the state. We know that the death of journalist Michael Hastings was clearly foul.
Absolutely.
He had written an article in Rolling Stones. For those who don't know, Rolling Stones is a magazine that led to the resignation of General Stanley McChrystal. Now, a witness had stated that he had seen sparks emanate from the rear of his newly purchased Mercedes-Benz, which is, of course, as I understand it, was just, in mint condition. The car was speeding and jackknifed, hit a tree, and caught fire. Now, what happened typically is, reserved for movie sets and special effects when you think about it. But he had been working on a story dealing with the NSA spy scandal. As far as I can understand here, let's see, a Bush advisor recently stated in public that what happened to Michael Hastings' car crash was, quote, consistent with a cyber car attack, unquote.
Absolutely. Well, some people said that it was almost like it was a missile hit the back of his car, which could very easily happen with our drone programs.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that the motor of a brand new Mercedes, which, by the way, are engineered not to explode,
mm-hmm.
was found 60 yards away makes anybody curious.
Right.
And I think it was a day or two before he had sent an email to some of his friends that the FBI was after him and he was going to go under the radar for a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was not an accident.
Well, I wonder why the media isn't really pretty much on top of this. I mean,
well, because the media is all owned and controlled, as the CIA admitted in the 70s.
mm-hmm.
They owned in the 70s 80% of the media. So whatever people are getting from mass media, if they're not listening to shows like yours or mine,
mm-hmm.
everything they're getting is pablum. It's just more mind control propaganda.
Okay.
And part of the Patriot Act, by the way, was approving a Department of Propaganda for the American people.
Right.
So, Americans better wake up, and they better wake up fast.
Right. All right. Now, there's another individual by the name of Andrew Breitbart, whose, sources claim died of a massive heart attack while walking outside late at one night here. 1 week before, he was to produce tapes of Obama's extremist activities in college. And get this, his coroner, Michael Cormier, at age 61, appeared to have died of arsenic poisoning on the 20th of April. Now, if this isn't compelling evidence of a sinister connection between the deaths of these two men, right. I don't know what else to tell you here.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
and look at how many biochemists have died since the invention of all these bird flu viruses.
Exactly.
Over 40.
Microbiologists have been dropping like flies as well.
Look at David Kelly in the UK.
Right.
They suicide people today, and they try to make it look like a suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And most people won't question it because, you know what, it's a very ugly place to go in your mind to think that your own government would do things like this. But people are getting disappeared and killed at an alarming rate.
Well, I want to go into that when you mentioned suicide. I want to go into the death of Aaron Swartz, okay? Now, here's a 26-year-old prodigy, a computer genius, and co-creator of RSS and Reddit, who all of a sudden mysteriously commits suicide as a result of being bullied by the Department of Justice. I mean, here he faced 13 felony charges, and the Department of Justice was pretty much relentless in making sure that he be prosecuted. Now, the question here to ask is, did he actually commit suicide, or was he suicided?
Well, we're going to, on that one, I have to tell you, I don't know that we'll ever know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But all they managed to do was martyr him in his death. Because there isn't a day that I don't see postings about him online.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's another one. His name is, or was actually, Ilya Zhytomyrsky. He was the co-founder of a startup social network called Diaspora, which has been described as the anti-Facebook for its emphasis on privacy and decentralized data collection, who was found dead. And authorities stated that he died at age 22 due to suicide. So it just want to makes you think they were kind of living, similar to the days of ancient Rome.
Right.
You know?
Well, like that movie, V for Vendetta.
Right.
Everybody gets disappeared in the middle of the night.
Right.
What
right.
I'm finding is that there are a lot of what I'll call truth tellers
Mm-hmm.
that are suddenly having heart attacks followed by strokes. And a lot of them are in agreement that these were some sort of weapons shot their way.
Mm-hmm.
So, we live in extremely dangerous times, especially for being a truth teller. God knows my own friends are like, Maria, do you realize you're like a moving target? And I'm like, whatever. I can't live my life in fear.
Yeah, you had stated at one point, as I recall in an interview that I heard online, that you and someone else were somewhere I guess out in public, and either you or your friend or person that you were with spotted like a red laser pointing at both of you.
Oh yeah, I've had that a couple of times. I've had that in my own backyard.
Wow.
So, look, stuff happens. I saw that and I was like, what the hell is that? Time to go inside. But what else can you do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But, if this little old lady is such a big threat to them, then so be it. I'm not here for their purposes. I'm here for my own.
Right. Okay. Well, let's just switch now to the Boston Marathon bombing here. My opinion is that it was, in effect, a staged event. No question.
Absolutely.
Okay. It was a false flag event. All these agencies knocking at people's door in search of a 19-year-old suspect. Come on. The young man was no doubt running for his life.
Right.
And then
shut down the entire city for it.
Exactly. And then they denied his Miranda rights.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on this?
Well, the take is that we're living under a rogue government that only uses the law when it suits them.
Mm-hmm.
So we live in a country where there's two sets of laws, one for us, one for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that boy, I don't even know that he's still alive, okay, because I'm getting reports out of the courtroom of which we're seeing 0 photographs, that the boy that pled not guilty 7 times today doesn't look like the boy that they're saying he is. So I don't know if my sense was he was dead when he got to the hospital because they had shot the shit out of that boat.
Oh, yeah.
And then they had to bring in doctors from Israel to work on him, as if we didn't have any good doctors here on our own. Whenever Israel's involved, there's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
But people are saying that it doesn't look like him. They were trying to make excuses to why his face looks swollen and all of this.
Mm-hmm.
God only knows what they did to him. Because, the Israelis, the way they treat people now are like reincarnated Nazis. And they have weapons and things that they can mess us over with that we can't even imagine in our wildest science fiction dreams.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's just switch to another frightening topic here. NBC went on the air. Matter of fact, Brian Williams, he made a frightening prediction on NBC a while back. Now, in the segment, he stated that we'll all have RFID chips by 2017. Now, it doesn't come to me as a surprise hearing this, because those who are considered insiders, so to speak, in the media as well as the entertainment industry know about this. A matter of fact, in my interview with Jordan Maxwell, we discussed how the entertainment industry fictionalizes the truth to convey a story.
Right.
Do you think that this will ever come to pass, Maria?
It's already come to pass. There's a lot of people who have put in RFID chips willingly because it's for their own good, whether it's to say they have a medical condition or whatnot. Some firms in America are requiring, especially hospitals, that their workers be chipped. Years ago, God, it has to be 10 years ago, I had interviewed Catherine Albrecht, whose her site, I think, is still spychips.com, on an excellent book, Spy Chips. I told people this was coming, but of course, I'm a crazy person. But when you look at it, absolutely, and people have to understand, these chips can be programmed in and out. So they will be used to control the masses. So I just tell people, if they ever tell you to get chipped, tell them the only chips you're interested in is chips and salsa.
Well, I do know that animals are being chipped, especially if you have them spayed or neutered. But with this whole chipping incident here, it just seems almost unthinkable that something like this would happen.
Well, it's not unthinkable because now there's certain prescriptions that are going to have chips inside the medication to alert your doctor in case you don't take the medicine he gives you. That's already happening.
Okay.
Chipping our kids in school, chipping their backpacks, their passes, their ID badges. Some schools, parents will fight against it, and other people, well, it's for your own good. When the government tells you this is for your own good, start running.
All right, but let's just say, I mean, you're a grandparent, you're also a parent. If you knew that something like this was being talked about, let's say by the school your children were in, would you just speak up and obviously argue against it?
Absolutely. God knows I've argued against less in my children's schools. I'm sure they had a bigger file on me than they had on my kids.
So why do you think that there's this complacency in the American public?
People are ignorant. They're overworked and underpaid. They're tired at the end of the day. They get all their information from TV. They've forgotten how to read books and do any research. And unfortunately, a lot of the people choose to be ignorant. I call it willful ignorance. There's a million factors to that. Their food, what they're eating, the lack of exercise, the lack of being outdoors in nature, the drugs they're all on, I mean, the fluoride in their water. I mean, there's a million reasons. Put it all together, it's a perfect cocktail to make you, numb down and dumb down.
Okay. Do you think that something like this, this RFID chipping will maybe be replaced by something far more sinister? And I'm thinking along the way here with cyber technology. Now, I had heard that there's this whole movement towards transhumanism. And the whole goal is to eventually turn us into cybernetic beings, to be part of a collective, okay? To strip away of our consciousness, our individual consciousness, so that we obey the commands of the quote-unquote Führer,
Absolutely. That's that book, Brave New World, by Aldous Huxley.
Right.
That was his picture, and I can tell you I would say we're 80% there. But, most people, they're just worried about American Idol, so they're not about to read Huxley or Orwell. But no, they would like to make us into, part human, part robot. But you know how that story ends. The robots take over.
Well, yes, because if you look at all the movies that we're seeing produced by Hollywood, for example, I don't know if you're into Star Trek, but there was this enemy called the Borg. And what they do is that they assimilate humans or any other species by injecting into them nanotechnology,
Right.
and they lose their individual uniqueness, their consciousness, and they become part of the collective. And it just seems nowadays in American society, if you think outside the box, if you're being creative,
Right.
it's deviant, so to speak. You
Well,
have to
yeah,
be
you'll be
part
the
of a
first
norm.
one rounded up. I have no doubt in my mind political dissidents are the first roundup.
Hmm. Intellectuals as
Anybody who
well.
can still think independently.
Hmm.
When they right after when the Patriot Act rolled out, the FBI had a folder they ended up getting out on the net, a brochure
Right.
of what defines a terrorist. And a couple of things in there was somebody carrying a Constitution, talking about the Constitution, and even vegetarians were thrown on that list as a terrorist because
Wow.
you don't form.
Wow, that's pretty severe. Okay, well, here's a whopper of a story here. The IRS is planning to pay its employees $70 million in bonuses. Now, here's a government agency that's started this year in an article, or actually stated this year in an article posted by the U.S. News and World Report, that it will be spying on our shopping records, travel, social interactions, and health records, and they decide to pay bonuses to its employees. And get this, according to an article in the Washington Times, 15 IRS agents also illegally appropriated 60 million, that's million, medical records from a California health insurance agency.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on this?
Well, first of all, the IRS is hardly a federal anything. The IRS is just a collection agency for the Federal Reserve, which is not federal nor a reserve. It's a private owned bank.
Right.
By the Rothschild-Rockefeller dynasty. But you look at all the IRS money that they've been, busted with for all their big parties and supposed conferences. You look at, nobody's complaining about the fact the IRS singled out, these Occupy movements, progressives, so many other people to be, audited, etc. And today I had a news story on my show where they, by accident, published on their website 100,000 Social Security numbers of people that donate to those groups. So that's what I think of the IRS, something that needs to be abolished.
Okay. Now here's another one I want to talk to you about here. Let's see. Federal agents can now invade hospital exam rooms thanks to HIPAA. That's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. Now, bear in mind that the P doesn't stand for privacy, but for portability. And when you think of this, think of electronic records which can be accessed anytime, from anywhere, from the feds, and you get the big picture. So in effect, the confidentiality that was once valued between doctors and patients has now been thrown out the window. Now, I'm not sure to defend the healthcare industry, since we all know healthcare costs have skyrocketed. And, one of the stipulations of this act is to prevent healthcare fraud and abuse. But, where do you draw the line when when you want to be with your doctor and a stranger pops into the exam room and uses the excuse that he or she has permission from HIPAA to sit and observe?
Right. Well, you can't draw the line. The line's already been drawn. We have no privacy. And with the NSA surveillance on top of this that you're talking about, not only do you lose doctor-patient confidentiality, but think about losing confidentiality with your attorney. Okay, so now the government can spy on any conversation you have with your attorney to bury you further when you go to court. And it kind of takes me back to the days where people were paranoid to use a credit card online, and I used to say, you kidding? No matter where you use that credit card, it's being tracked. So, in a way, I was kind of glad Snowden came out with this because he gave credibility to everything I've been telling people for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, there's your proof. I guess I'm not crazy.
You think more Americans should just do away with their credit cards and ATM cards and just use cash instead?
Well, today it's impossible. You know, back in when they started with credit cards, which I think was like the mid-'60s, you know, the conspiracy theorists at the time were saying they're trying to move us to a cashless society. But everybody laughed at that. But today we truly are a cashless society. Most people, when they go out, even if you go to a movie now, you use a credit card. You know, very few people carry cash. And I'm sure sooner or later they'll put tracking chips in every dollar they print as well, if they're not already there.
But don't you believe that the whole purpose behind Americans using credit cards is because they've been programmed, because it's convenience?
Absolutely.
And so forth. I mean, you people, I know most people, I know I'm one of them, I get junk mail from credit card companies wanting me to get a credit card.
Right.
You know, first thing I do is just shred the mail, you know.
Right.
But when you think about it, if you go online, maybe watch TV, you'll be inundated with commercials about the ease in using a credit card for travel and whatnot. And again, it's programming.
Absolutely. It's not any different than these ridiculous drug commercials that I see on television. You know, they're showing you all these pretty scenes and people skipping through the woods, and they're telling you, you know, well, here's some of the side effects. You can go blind, you could drop dead, you could have a heart attack. But as long as they're showing you pretty pictures, people are still going to ask for those drugs. So, you know, there's a huge amount of subliminal messages out there constantly.
Well, yes.
But most people don't see it.
Yeah, I had a guest here, and we were discussing how so many antidepressants are being prescribed to people out there. And if you notice what you see on television or, let's say, on the internet or a magazine, you either don't have the perfect body, you don't have the perfect car, the perfect house, the perfect marriage. And so what it does is that you become depressed, your self-esteem, you know, goes down. So what do? You seek professional help. You go to your doctor. He or she, lets you go to a specialist or points, that you go to a specialist. A specialist, that psychiatrist, is going to prescribe antidepressants. So it's a vicious cycle when you see these commercials, these programs on television that tell you, well, you're not good enough to have this. You become depressed, you go to a doctor, you get antidepressants, and in effect, you suffer the side effects of these.
I totally agree. It's just another program.
It's a vicious cycle.
If people are depressed, you know what? One of the best cures for depression is to spend time in nature. But because we've been so disconnected from nature, taught to fear nature, everybody starts getting depressed. It's like living in, I'm trying to think the state, I think Seattle, where they have that sad disease because they don't get enough sunshine, and they become depressed.
Right.
But since we're so far removed from the natural world where humans don't even think they're a part of it, of course they're depressed. So, why don't they go out and take a hike or go to a park instead of taking a pill that clearly gives you in the warning their antidepressants may give you thoughts of suicide. Well, I would think if it's an antidepressant, you'd want to be all laughing and giggling after you take the pill, not thinking about running out in the middle of the street and throwing yourself in front of a truck, which a lot of people do, especially our children. These antidepressants are not tested for nor made for anybody under 18, and now they're giving them to toddlers.
Yeah, it's really really sad, and more and more people are spending more time indoors and less time outdoors. When you think about it.
I agree. I mean, for me, it doesn't matter where I'm living. If I have a little outdoor space, that's where I am most of the time. But most people don't do that anymore. In big cities, you don't even see children playing outside anymore. I mean, I live in a small rural town, so I get to see a lot of children on bicycles, on skateboards, running down the street playing with their friends.
Right.
But you don't see that in the city. It's done. And that's another reason our kids are so fat and, getting all kinds of labels thrown on them for not being normal. Well, you know, a kid can't be normal if they don't play outside.
Right. Okay. Well, Meria, let's talk here about another topic here about aerial drones. According to an article on Press TV, the FAA predicts 10,000 aerial drones in the U.S. in 5 years. And also, get this, apparently President Obama now has the legal authority to unleash deadly force, in this case, drone strikes against Americans on U.S. soil, without first bringing them to trial, to justice. And under extraordinary circumstances, it's unbelievable, of course, when you think about this. And in Holder's words, let's see, I'm quoting him here, quote, we'll use such force to protect the homeland, unquote. Now, Meria, does the term homeland bring up memories for some of us here who can remember World War II? Exactly. Homeland, I associate homeland with the fatherland.
Well, look, who created the term homeland? It happened under George Bush's reign, the idiot king.
Right.
And whose grandfather supported the Nazis. It was George Bush's grandfather that supported the Nazis. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of very strong cases that you can make that we're still living under a Nazi Germany regime, because our CIA was funded and founded by Nazis that we snuck in through Operation Paperclip. NASA was created with Nazis. You know, I mean, who were the people that made all the best bombs? It was the Nazis.
Right.
You know, so every now and then, a couple of weeks ago, they found some 94-year-old Nazi living in some Midwestern state. And all his neighbors were so shocked. Well, who harbors terrorists more than the United States? You know, and he's just a drop in the bucket. I mean, people really need to do the research, you know. But they just, you know, they're too busy.
Right. Well, now that you mentioned Nazis here, I'm just curious, are you aware of a waging war being fought by two factions in this country, specifically on the east and west coast of this country?
Who are the factions?
Well, according to two guests, these were super soldiers that were interviewed by Project Camelot. There are two factions, the East Coast consisting of Zionists and the West Coast consisting of Nazis. And ultimately, the aim here is, from what I understand it, is to usher in the Fourth Reich. I mean, if you look at the emerging patterns, if you begin to connect the dots, you know, with the Department of Homeland Security amassing weapons and ammunition, and the crusade to strip the U.S. Constitution from the Second and Fourth Amendment, then you begin to see the big picture. Are you aware of this, by any chance?
Well, I didn't hear it in quite those terms. I don't think there's a big difference between Zionists and Nazis. But what I do find interesting is Germany's reaction to the NSA and how many Germans are up in arms because they say this reminds them of the days of the Stasi. So if the Germans can recognize this as a Nazi movement, then I don't understand why Americans can't. But then, of course, they don't learn real history.
Right.
But no, I haven't heard that specifically, but you know, I have no doubt that Hollywood is totally Zionist-controlled. Look at the crap they constantly keep brainwashing us with the films they put out. You know, and it's nothing but lies and distortions.
Well, when you think about it from a bigger perspective, from the bigger picture, you know, with our laws being introduced, you know, we are seeing the decline of what was considered sacred, in this case, a democratic republic. And I think, in my opinion, I'm stating this because it's fact that after 9/11, everything changed from one day to the next.
Exactly. You know? That's why we have to have the truth exposed about 9/11, because we're living in the why. And that's what I tell people. Forget the who and how. We've already covered that to death. Now we're living in the why of 9/11. Who benefited? They ushered in a total police state. And
Right.
it's worldwide, you know what I mean? It's not just happening here, it's worldwide.
Yeah.
The middle class, the poor, the workers, all being crushed under one giant foot.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of their plan to zombify us all.
Well, let me ask you this. What's your opinion of President Obama? Um, I've seen videos, I've seen interviews by other people, pictures and so forth of him that speculate that he's not the man who we perceive him to be, or the man that we saw him after he was, officially, elected.
Right.
That in fact, I'm going to throw this out there, but that in fact he is a clone.
Well, I don't know about a clone, but I wouldn't put it past that he's actually a reptilian. I mean, you look at that man, and there's nothing, whatever comes out of his mouth is the opposite of what he is.
Mm-hmm.
He's a total CIA construct, and he was groomed for the job of puppet, the head puppet of the United States.
Okay.
I see him for myself as an extremely dangerous man. Years and years ago, I think it was when he was running for office, I had interviewed a man who had said, just in passing, he said that Obama had like eight of the 10 descriptions of the Antichrist.
Can you recall those descriptions?
Not offhand, I can't, but I remember one night watching him on YouTube. He was giving some kind of speech or whatever, and for a very quick second, I saw his total eyeballs turn black, just like in a zombie movie. And I did a double take on my computer. I was like, what? What did I just see? But you understand that clones have been around for a long time. There was a lot of discussion on that about Bush and Cheney. And I think every time they roll Cheney into the hospital, he's getting his cloning repaired. I mean, the plus of a clone, though, is that every time they clone somebody, it loses more and more of their essence.
Well, the reason why I throw this out there is because, the people, one person is a super soldier. His name is Michael Prince. I don't know if you heard of him before. Another is by the name of John Kettler. He's an ex-military analyst, writer, and researcher. And they stated that he's actually a clone, that the original President Obama is somewhere secluded underground, and what we're seeing is just, quote-unquote, a puppet for those who want to maintain control. Now,
that's pretty much what every president has been since Kennedy.
Yeah. Now, what stands out about this president is that a while back, Brents.com had published a photo of President Obama's profile, and it was a close-up of his head, and what appeared were like sutures that had been opened up and, of course, sealed up on his head.
I know what you're talking about, that giant scar on his head that nobody has any reason to understand why he has it.
Exactly.
But he could have, they could have put an implant in him.
That's another possibility there. So when you think about it, with him introducing these new laws in effect to change the political landscape of our our republic, do you think that what we're seeing on TV is not the person we saw the day of his election?
I can't agree with that. I think it's the same guy.
Okay.
I don't think he was ever any good. And there's so many people that still want to believe he's the second coming. I can't even understand that.
I mean, it just seems that he has this magnetic quality about him.
Of course. Satan's very charismatic, too.
Yeah, exactly.
What does that mean?
Yeah. And it just seems that whenever he makes a speech, there are some people who completely just tune out. In this case, tune out their thinking for the words that he's stating in public. without ever realizing, well, what am I actually listening to?
Right.
You know?
I agree. And, he's very mesmerizing to a lot of people, and I think
Right.
it's deliberate.
Okay. Now, as long as we're on the subject of cloning here, have you ever thought the next time you go to your doctor for a blood panel and wonder why they need so much blood? You know,
I've often wondered why they need so much blood. They never give me a good explanation because I ask every single time.
right. And, when, let's say, someone, in this case, an expecting mother, goes into the hospital, obviously, when she gives birth, uh, has anyone ever wondered, let's say, in that room, what happens to the placenta and the umbilical cord?
No, people don't wonder, but what they don't understand is a lot of that stuff ends up in your beauty products. Just like a lot of aborted fetuses end up in your beauty products as well.
Well, have you ever considered that these byproducts of the human body could be sold to these private laboratories for other nefarious reasons?
Of course. Now they want to take everybody's DNA when you get stopped by a cop, whether you're guilty or not. What are they going to do with that DNA? No one questions it.
Right.
They can set you up for any kind of, criminal offense because they've got your DNA. Hey, if they want to clone me, go right ahead. I could use a couple more me to help me out with my workload. But I doubt they're going to be cloning me anytime soon.
Right. Okay. I was just throwing that question out there because, this is something that really, if anyone wants to ask, and
they clone sheep, they clone dogs, they clone cats. If your dog is dead or dying, for several $1,000s, they'll clone it, which I see in the papers a lot. And I noticed a posting on Facebook today that they've created the perfect baby in a laboratory. When they first start admitting to cloning, it's already been going on for a long time. When they start to pass a law against something, that means they're already doing it.
Well, I heard there are benefits to this because, in effect, let's say you can actually store, a cloned body of yourself should a serious accident happen to you in the foreseeable future. Let's say, God forbid anybody, let's say, loses a leg or an arm. You can, well, in this case, medically take the arm out of your cloned body and surgically attach that arm or leg.
Yeah, but what happens to the cloned body? This is it's a metaphysical question. Does a clone have a soul?
Exactly. I was going to go there. Does it have consciousness?
Right. The clone animals, you have cloned animals in your meat supply now in the supermarkets. So are you actually eating an animal? Did that other animal have a soul? If so, was it abused? People have to understand one thing. My father used to say, this life is terminal from the minute you're born, and nobody gets out alive. And instead of making people fear death, they should have them look forward to it like you're looking forward to the birth of a new child. Because death is just another experience. It's just another entry into a different world. But people are too attached to their physical bodies. They don't get that their physical body is just a temporary spacesuit so they can be on this planet.
Now, there's there was an interesting passage. I don't know if you ever read the books from Edgar Cayce.
Oh, yes, read them all.
Yes, and Mr. Cayce had stated that America is Atlantis, but on a higher level.
Maybe it was then.
Maybe it was then, but are we seeing the last days of our nation comparable to what happened, let's say, 12,000 years ago? It's my understanding that the Atlanteans, they were into cloning. Mr. Cayce had used the term automatons in his readings, and he was referring to these beings that were created by the Atlanteans for those, selfish purposes.
Right.
It's my understanding, too, that if you've ever read Greek mythology, where you have like the centaurs, the fauns, the
Mhm.
mermaids.
Right.
These are in fact created by the Atlanteans because again they were into genetics. You
Right.
know?
Well, so was Hitler. Hitler
Yes.
created a lot of those bizarre things too, which might have been where that movie Island of the Lost Souls took their idea from,
Hmm.
where they were, half animal, half man.
Right.
But look, I hate to say this because I am an American. I was born and raised in this country,
Hmm.
but I don't see anything good coming to America. America is finished, and I know that's a terrible thing to say, but I know that. And sometimes it's just things and it could be all the years of my study. It could be my own spiritual thoughts on it.
Hmm.
But America is already done. We have no respect in the world, no credibility. Every war since Vietnam, we've lost. We've lost in Afghanistan. We've lost in Iraq. Wherever we go, we're going to lose. The whole world hates us now because of the NSA. Our economy is totally crashed. Our people are sickly and dumbed down. I don't even know that Americans could rally to fight a civil war. So whatever this country was founded on, which I believe was genocide, and I've always said that as part of my teachings, a country founded on genocide can only end with genocide.
Hmm.
But of course, nobody wants to talk about the genocide of the Native Americans here. That's not politically correct. So, karma is a bitch. And I think this nation's karma is coming back in spades. I mean, look, half the country's on fire, the other half is in drought. We're losing our crops. Wall Street is just totally propped up with phony numbers. Most Americans are, either homeless or on their way. And I don't see any hope coming. Do you?
Hmm.
I don't want to be a downer, but, this is a realization I've come to in the past few months. Whatever ounce of patriotism I may have had is gone. And yet, a lot of my guests say, but you are a patriot because of what you continue to do.
Hmm.
And I don't know what there is about me that doesn't make me just quit.
Right.
Say the hell with it. Let me just enjoy the few years I have left and screw it.
Okay. Well, we are approaching the end of the first hour here, Maria. In your candid assessment of what we just discussed, do you see our nation, America, the United States of America, becoming an eventual police state, or are we already there and
We're
past the
there.
point of no return?
No, we're already there. We're past the point of no return.
Do you see a glimmer of hope for those who seek a better future for this country?
No. The only hope I've always known is a spiritual hope, to understand what you are inside your body and that none of this matters. And if you can't get that, you're going to go down with the ship.
Okay. Okay, well, Maria, can you remind our listeners on how they can reach you and your website once again?
Yeah, absolutely. You can contact me through my site. It's meria.net, meria.net. Just Google Maria Heller. You want to, watch hours and hours of video or whatever. It's all out there.
Okay. And you also have a channel on YouTube, correct?
Yes, I do. Wherever I am, I use my real name, Maria Heller. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you are. I mean, I'm putting it out there, but it's up to people to support that.
Great. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time here to chat with me for the first hour, and I look forward to our second hour here.
Me too.
Okay. Thanks again, Maria, okay? Take care.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye. That's it for the first hour on As Above, So Below Radio. Tune in for the second hour by subscribing to HolisticAdvocate.com, where Maria will impart her perspective on secret projects involving the U.S. government, specifically chemtrails and how these aerosols work in harmony with cell phone towers and HARP, the dying bees and how GMOs and Monsanto are the root cause for the die-offs, how fluoridation is being purposely used to dumb us down, and how artificial intelligence will be part of the social fabric with the use of robots, and much more. You're listening to As Above, So Below Radio.